Welcome back to Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers, the podcast devoted to exploring the frontiers of psychedelic medicine and what it takes to cultivate a healthy mind, body, and spirit. I'm Dr. Steve Thayer, and today my co-host, Dr. Reid Robison, and I try to cope with the paradoxes of life. We start the podcast by giving a brief trip report on a breathwork session that Reid and I participated in last night. It was pretty wild. We had a good time. We discuss why people struggle with paradoxes generally, explain how the drive to reduce cognitive dissonance can lead to dysfunction. We explore how mindful acceptance of all that we are can help us cope with paradoxes, and of course, much, much more. Quick plug for the unique training opportunities that Numinous is offering mental health professionals to develop an expertise in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. These courses are carefully crafted by Numinous professionals and offer a variety of high-quality learning experiences. So, if you'd like to learn more about the training that Numinous offers, go to numinous.com/training. That's numinous.com/training. There's also a link below in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, you can do that by subscribing to it, leaving us a review in places like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and of course, sharing this episode with somebody you think might be interested. Thank you to all of those who've already done this, left us reviews, given us feedback. We appreciate you. Please enjoy today's episode. So Reid, you and I went to a really cool holotropic breathwork workshop last night with our friends 7 Sacred Spaces here in Utah.
I don't know if you can call it holotropic. That might be trademarked.
Oh, true. Okay. Well, it was trippy breathing. How about that? It was deliberate hyperventilation to achieve altered states. Mm-hmm. How about that?
Yep. I'll allow it.
Thank you. Yeah, our copyright lawyer will allow it. But yeah, so it was really cool. Great setting. Fun way to induce the experience with their method of inquiry.
Great setting, meaning the biggest gong I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Bigger, higher than the ceiling in this 10-foot room.
Yeah, like it was probably like a 9-foot diameter gong. It was enormous.
Yeah.
And they used that gong at the end. So we're doing the breath work. There's ambient music. I mean, music was penetrating your soul. It was really loud music. And they're going around and saging and doing, encouraging words, trying to keep us attuned to the intention for the night. And it was a couples workshop. So I was there with my wife. You were there with your partner and a couple of our friends there with their partners. It was cool.
Yeah.
Cool group of people. So we're doing that, and then I'm full body tetany. I'm curled up like a bug.
Lobster claws,
lobster legs. Having a great experience with related to my particular intention that night. But then they say last song, so I'm like, okay, last song, here we go. And so I just double time my breath, trying to really get there. And then they say on the count of 3, I'm going to hit this gong, and everybody screams. 1, 2, 3. She hits that giant gong. And of course, none of us can even hear ourselves scream, let alone the people next to us. All we hear is gong. It was a full send-off. I was totally gone. It was like
That was amazing. Yeah. I lost my voice, but I don't care.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
It was worth it.
And then we went, we have a little mixer afterward.
Kombucha mingling.
And I was talking to you. I was teasing you about your prayer beads that were actually super cool. and then we hear somebody next to us go, wait a second, I recognize those voices.
Because you said, Reid.
I said, Reid. And it very mumuch sounds like something I would say on the podcast. And she's like, I think I listened to your podcast. So fun. It was so funny. Because most of the people consume our podcast via audio only. We do have these on YouTube, by the way, folks, if you want to actually see my bald head and bearded face. And Reid's just amazing blue eyes. You just get lost in those eyes. But yeah, so she hears us talking. She's like, oh, I'm a fan of your podcast. I love your content. It was just kind of funny to be recognized by our voices.
Yeah, that was super cool. I love that people listen. Like when we set out to do this, a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Timidly and wondering if anyone would actually listen to us have a conversation. Here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like we have an enormous audience, but enough that that scenario I'm describing has probably happened to me 3 or 4 times since we started, and it's so fun. I have no desire to be super well recognized. I won't speak for you, Reid, but I don't want to be famous. But I want this podcast to be impactful. I want it to elevate and to educate and to uplift people.
Yeah. No, I love that we have listeners and that there's feedback that it's been helpful content, that they like our perspective and the stuff we share. So thank you, listeners.
Thank you, listeners. And that listener who spoke up and introduced herself.
Yeah. But last night gave me a renewed appreciation for breathwork as a modality. For a number of reasons, is because you kind of control how deep you go. And it's a full body experience. Like I went in there, I've done, I don't know, breathwork 100 times or so, guided a bunch of them, probably a lot more than 100 times. But a few minutes in, there are tears that I didn't know were going to come up, and all sorts of emotions, insights coming from every direction. It was pretty profound.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend there who's quite the psychonaut, but this was the first time he'd tried breath work. And he said, I had probably 2 or 3 different medicine type experiences tonight. And he stood up and he's like, I feel like I'm tripping, so many insights, so blissful, at least for him.
You are tripping.
Yeah, you are. You're tripping on your own energy. Yeah, but similar to you, I went through quite the journey of fear, tears, energy, empowerment, confidence. It was
lobster clawing.
Yeah. At one point I was trying to go like full send. I was trying to just breathe as hard as I could for as long as I could. And my throat started to close. It was like exercise induced
sage allergy.
Yeah, maybe it was. I had to wash everything we brought there with all the sage they were burning in there. But yeah, so and that induced a little bit of fear. So I'm like, I wonder if I could breathe through this fear when even though the breath might be causing my throat to close, and I just started to keep going.
Breathe your way dead.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but super cool. And I want to do more breath work. It feels like an athletic event, at least the way they ran this breath work, and it appealed to sort of the athletic teenager I was. I played high school sports. I loved that masculine energy of pushing hard, pushing past your limits.
Yeah.
So there would be these times when I was like feeling totally exhausted last night and just wanted to stop and rest. And I was like, no, I'm just going to do 10 more breaths, 10 more. Do it really, really hard. And then at the end of 10, come on, 10 more. You can do it. You can do it. Like not in a self-flagellating way, but like, let's go, dude. Like you can do this.
Yeah. It's self-reinforcing, motivating, because you're getting deeper and deeper into this altered state. But what's neat is even if you lose yourself for a moment, like there were a few times when I just forgot that I was a human and was there to breathe. But you're floating in that state of consciousness. Once you get there, you can ride it for a while.
Yeah. Another fun experience I had was I had an experience of chakras. And I don't, I haven't educated myself a lot about chakras and the beliefs behind that, but I felt these bundles of energy at these places, like all the way from my perineum up to the crown of my head. And it was like buzzing, like real energy.
That's cool.
And at one point I howled. Apparently I scared the crap out of my wife. She told me that. But I howled and I felt all the energy just go like out my mouth. And I was all of it, like my tetany went away. And then as I was breathing, it slowly came back. Like I was just charging and discharging a battery. So fun. So
that's cool. I like the chakra system. I'll admit it. Having dissected lots of cadavers in med school and never found a whirling ball of energy, a wheel. Like, I don't care. It's an amazing system. We don't see all the energy that's inside of us. Right. And I love it as a framework, tried and tested one through like eons, a way of looking at different systems and energetic centers in the body. Like, I've kind of pictured them as these windmills or whirling balls of energy that can either be underactive or overactive. And we're striving for balance, or them firing on all cylinders or whirling in kind of equilibrium. As an example, you've got your heart chakra, let's say, and your crown chakra, for example, and then your throat chakra. And someone who may be struggling to speak up, you could kind of see that, or to use their voice, speak their truth, hold their ground. You could see that as an area to work on. getting that energy whirling again, because that's kind of the bridge between mind and heart where you speak your truth, that throat chakra. And then the system of yoga is so cool because it's based on these energy centers, and a lot of the practices are moving sequentially up from the base of the spine where there's this dormant kundalini energy, and you're doing practices that move, like physically move the energy up, and then you're starting to like put your foot behind your head to move it up further, and at the end of the practice you get in a headstand to move the energy closer to your crown, and then you're meditating at the end and boom, blast it out of the crown. A direct connection with the divine. Anyway, it's pretty cool.
The foot behind the head reminds me, I saw a video of people doing breath work once, and there was a guy who had his foot behind his head as he was doing this really intense breath work.
Should I put my foot behind my head right now? It's tempting.
We'll save that for later. Yeah, for the Patreon. Like if we had a Patreon, it would be Reid putting his foot behind his head. Yeah. So anyway, fun, cool.
7 sacred spaces. They run a pretty epic breathwork show.
Yeah,
so check them out.
Again, the gong is worth the trip. Anyway, we didn't intend to necessarily make the whole episode about our breathwork class, but today we thought we would talk about paradox, about dualities and paradox.
Yeah, because the way I see it, the stronger the paradox, the more trippy the paradox, the more important the truth underneath it, in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so paradox is, it's trying to grapple with things that seem to be dissonant, right? That two things that seem true but don't necessarily agree with one another. And human minds we don't love paradoxes. We don't love dualities. We prefer things to be clear, succinct, black and white, good or bad. Nuance sometimes freaks us out, especially when that shows up in our own behavior. So there's this well understood and oft discussed concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance, where when we detect a paradox, let's say between a belief about ourselves and our behavior, let's say we think we are kind, loving people, and we say something that offends another person. That creates this dissonance in ourselves, like a cognitive and emotional dissonance. Think of dissonance meaning like disharmony, right? You got two notes that are out of tune and played together. It sounds bad. It's cacophonous. So it creates this state of distress, and we are motivated to resolve cognitive dissonance. And we do it, and I can go into this more if you'd like, but there are adaptive ways that we resolve that dissonance, and then some ways that are less adaptive, more maladaptive ways.
Yeah, like over controlling the chaos so much that you close yourself off to parts of life. Whether it's getting hurt in relationships, so closing that door for a long time, so you're also closed off to receiving love, period,
right.
For example, or over control around food. As another example, like restrictive eating patterns.
Yeah. Also, like the Freudian defense mechanisms, like denial, repression, justification, rationalization. You'll see that a lot when, back to my example, like let's say I see myself as a kind, compassionate, pro-social human, and I do something that hurts another person's feelings, and I'm confronted by that. I might try to resolve that dissonance by making excuses or saying, oh, I was just joking, invalidating their experience, getting defensive. Oh, you shouldn't have taken that so hard. I'm trying to maintain this belief that I think is static, that I am always, it is part of who I am, my very nature, to be compassionate. It invokes the really interesting concept that we can get into as well of the shadow, that we all have shadow sides, right? We all have parts of ourselves that are capable of doing things that maybe our ego ideal would not be thrilled to admit. Yeah.
And unless you recognize that and attend to it and, admit that it's there, like Carl Jung says, it'll direct your life in unconscious ways. Hence the term shadow work. Shadow work, the path of the heart warrior, they say.
Yeah, and you hear the term shadow work used a lot in the psychedelic space for sure.
Trending on TikTok too.
But yeah, I was going to say, like a lot of the Instagram, TikTok therapy folks, even people who aren't professionals, will talk about shadow work. Like, have you done your shadow work? And we talked a bit about it on the show. But, this shadow is this ego dystonic complex that's relegated to our unconscious. As I said, the parts of us that are true of us, but we don't want to admit that they're true, or we're not even aware that they're true, that they're down there.
My personal definition includes both of those, not just the ego dystonic stuff, but just the stuff that's beneath the surface of our awareness that might not trouble us as much as some other things too, just like the unconscious. Yeah.
And ego dystonic doesn't mean negative. It just means something that doesn't sync up with your concept of yourself, with your ego. So like you could have an egoic perception of yourself or identity that's fairly negative, right? You could think you're a terrible person. And then something in your shadow could be like, you're actually capable of kindness. You're actually capable of being great. And that can be hard to grapple with when you pull it out of the unconscious.
And as a tangential aside, like as an example in mental health in the diagnostic world of ego dystonic versus ego syntonic, one I've always liked is OCD versus OCPD, like obsessive compulsive disorder, where you spend hours a day either, thinking about or acting out on obsessions and compulsions like hand washing or fear of germs. And that's ego dystonic. Like you don't want it to be there. It's running your life.
You may even know that the compulsions are needless and the obsessions are irrational, but you kind of feel helpless.
Yeah, you have to check the lock X number of times every day before you can sleep. Versus OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, where it's more of a perfectionistic way of showing up in the world, and where you have to have things a certain way or do these routines, but you like to do it. It's more ego syntonic.
Yeah. In fact, you'd wish that the members of your family that criticize you were more cleanly and more organized, that they'd get with the program, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting from in the psychedelic literature, there's this entropic brain theory. Like I like what you said initially about in the chaos, there's this drive to organize or move towards order. And our brains kind of act like that. Like we are prediction machines where we layer on predictions based on sensory input that help us navigate the world. So we encounter something. It's like threat detection and, ways in our guidance system. And when something doesn't match our prediction, like sensory input coming in, we have that dissonance or that chance to resolve it. And in cases of over rigidity, it's the rules in our minds rule over the sensory input. But in an ideal world, we're taking in the input and fixing our prediction machinery according to what comes in, the new information.
Right. Yeah, so a variety of ways that we try to grapple with paradoxes, right, to resolve the cognitive dissonance. And it's easier to philosophize about paradox and dualities, to think about it in the realm of concepts. But when we're confronted with our own paradoxes or the paradoxes of people we admire, the old phrase like never meet your heroes. In fact, this funny story about this. Another podcast listener reached out to me and they were doing an assignment for school and wanted to interview me for the assignment. And I was like, sure. And so, she starts the interview by saying, it's so cool to meet you. I feel like I'm meeting sort of one of my heroes. And then she says, but never meet your heroes. And we giggled and I said, I will surely disappoint you. I'm just a person. And as a person, if we get talking long enough, I'm going to sound real dumb. I'm going to say something probably insensitive. One of my blind spots will be obvious to you and totally unobvious to me. And we don't love that, right? We like to see people. I had this experience in college. Like I kept trying to find the professor, the teacher, the guide who had it all figured out. And then I could offload all my uncertainty onto this person.
Yeah.
But to actually make space for paradox is to make space for uncertainty. And that's distressing.
Yeah, it reminds me of the contemplative practices and all the like Zen centers and sanghas out there and the yoga studios where people find a teacher or a guru, if you will, and they follow them because there is value in the surrender into a path and the deep discipline and devotion of a path. But then somewhere along the way, they have a crisis because they see that their guru or their teacher is human, and they're faced with this paradox of what do I do? And it could be, that's a deep dissonance that can be difficult to navigate. And part of the path, the way I see it, is, we need the ability to hold both. This is a great teacher and they're human too. And, I'm doing the best I can. I can always do better. That kind of dialectic or paradox as well.
Yeah, I think you're seeing this in American culture writ large as we sort of grapple with our history, statues being taken down and, quote unquote, canceling people from history that had, up until now, had sort of universal appeal. And it's tough. It's tough to think that, with your comment about gurus, here's somebody who, in their presence, I achieved, non-dual consciousness. I achieved enlightenment. I've learned so much from this person. And I learned that they embezzled money or they took advantage of one of their students sexually. How is that possible? Yeah. How is it possible that I could have changed so much in a positive direction as a result of their teachings, and they do this horrible thing? But this is what we're talking about, right? That people are not monochromatic. Right?
Yeah.
We have many colors. We are a symphony of selves, to quote Fadiman's book title.
Yeah, it's reminds me of the yin yang. Everything contains the seed of its opposites. There is a speck of dark within the light and light within the dark. Darth Vader and all these other examples out there in the literature. And it's not about being wholly one or the other. That doesn't exist. It's about accepting that that's what is and finding balance, not getting, in your example, so hung up on the paradoxes that we get stuck.
Another fun thought I had about paradoxes is the wave particle duality of, of quantum level phenomena like light. That even at the physical fundamental nature of reality, there is paradox. And maybe we resolve the paradox if we learn more. I'm not a quantum physicist.
A point and a wave.
Yeah. How can it be both? Depending on how it's measured, depending on the context. But for me, this is maybe just a weird stretch. For me, it's comforting to know that the nature of the matter and energy that I'm made up of is paradoxical. By its very nature, it's paradoxical. So it stands to reason, and again, probably a logical leap, but that we as human beings, comprised of all these particles/waves, would also be paradoxical.
Yeah.
How's that for quantum?
No, it's true. And you see it through the spiritual teachings through the ages. We were just talking about yin-yang, that system of dualities, but Taoism teaches that there are two forces, right? Two sides, like the Force in Star Wars, and the universe is this oscillation of the forces of dark and light, and we need to learn from both sides.
I pulled a quote from Einstein about this particular phenomenon that I think is fun to apply to human beings. He's talking about light, but he says, "It seems as though we must use sometimes the one theory and sometimes the other, while at times we may use either. We are faced with a new kind of difficulty. We have two contradictory pictures of reality. Separately, neither of them fully explains the phenomenon of light, but together they do." So I like to think of people that way. Like a person is either all good or all bad. Separately, neither one of these phenomena explain what it means to be human, but together, the yin-yang, they do.
Yeah. So, and with the Tao, it's like this flowing force. I almost see it as a river, and you learn to surf or ride the natural direction of it instead of, like we were talking about, getting caught up in fighting with what is. So it's like, learning to listen more and argue less, or be flexible, live simply, be actually who you are. Tune into that and be more of that instead of trying to fight with what is actually there.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about that? So be more of who you really are. in the context of paradoxes and dualities, like who are we really? Like when you think about trying to be who you really are, what do you mean?
Yeah. So from a Taoist approach, there are two things that come to mind. Ram Dass has some good words. We can get into that maybe if there's time. But from a Taoist approach, there's this natural direction of your life. There's this natural dharma, if you will, of the deck of cards you're born with, your gifts, your unique ability to cultivate things based on where you are in time and the opportunities you have in your life. And if you can quiet the noise and tune into that and relax into the natural direction of your life, whether that's being a stand-up comedian or a therapist or whatever it is, then you're going with the flow of the energy instead of trying to be something that you're not, like trying to be perfect because we were, perfect in a religion you were raised in because that's what you were told to do at a formative young age, and or whatever it is, like this uphill battle fighting against what is actually unfolding. It's like swimming in the wrong direction, or instead of like finding the direction of your life, relaxing into it like a lazy river that you can still steer, but you're not like frantically dog paddling upstream or wasting energy on fighting against what is.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know, just one way of thinking about it.
One way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And, we have an episode probably like a year or so ago where we talked about finding purpose, like finding your purpose.
Yeah.
And you hear of that a lot from people or from like sort of the motivational interview or motivational types online. Like you got to find your purpose. But I don't know that your purpose is something out there hidden from you that once you find it, you will, effortlessly do all the things you were supposed to do in this life. I don't know that I quite believe in purpose in that way.
Yeah. And maybe to clarify it more, still in this Taoist framework, it's getting rid of the unnecessary suffering, wasted energy. And here I'll read something that I've revisited through the ages as a reminder. Like in Taoism, the sage is faced with paradoxes that would mortify most people, but do not seem to bother her or him at all. Because the sage is detached yet compassionate, enjoys life yet does not cling to it, is a perfectionist yet indifferent to success or failure, is a woman or man of honor yet avoids reaping honor, ignores ethics and morals but lives a life of the highest moral order, does not strive yet achieves, knows the answer but prefers to remain silent, has the innocence and playfulness of a child but incredible inner strength.
Yeah, so I'm listening to you say those things, and there is definitely like this part of me that hates dissonance, that is like, no, what?
No way.
How? Like, they got to be one or the other. Like, how can you be both? But the more awake, and I guess I was going to say enlightened. That's just a word I rarely use, but for myself. But the more enlightened part of me, the more core self, to use an IFS phrase, I guess, part of me would gets it.
Yeah, like if you're a leopard and you're tense and on edge all the time, you're less able to be your full self as that supple leopard next to you that's relaxed and playful but ready to pounce and not wasting energy on worrying about someone attacking him all the time. I don't know if that's a random example.
I like it. And then actually Supple Leopard is a name of a book written by Kelly Starrett.
I like it. Yeah.
He's got some good stuff.
I read it once upon a time, but the main thing I took from it is just
stretch.
Be a supple leopard.
Yeah. Move.
Yeah, do yoga.
Move often, do yoga. Yeah.
Yeah. I think of it, to be honest, in acro yoga, there's this, partner yoga where you're flying someone on your feet or you're flying on someone's feet or hands. You have to be like, some say a wet noodle or a supple leopard. You have to be like light but somewhat stiff. To not flop over and fall to the ground, but not be so tense that you can't fly.
Yeah, flexibly strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to this sort of enlightened person who can hold the paradoxes or be the paradoxes. To me, that's one of the healthier ways of dealing with the dualities and paradoxes in life, in yourself. It's just to widen your aperture, like widen your aperture for what's acceptable. Create space for all of it. Acknowledge that it is our nature to have within us the capacity to to be one of the concentration camp guards. Like we like to think that we would be this unbreakable moral character no matter the circumstances. And unfortunately, the history and some of the social psychological research suggests that you might not be. In fact, the odds are against you. The Milgram experiences showed that most people freaking turn that dial up on...
The prison experiments?
No, that's the electrification one.
Oh.
Stanley Milgram, where he had people... they're behind I think it was, they couldn't see the participant, but they could hear them on the radio, and they were instructed by this person in a white lab coat to give the person shocks if they got answers to questions wrong.
Yeah.
And on the box, as they're flipping this is an old experiment, they had these little toggles, right? The last few toggles are like XXX, implying that like if they got to this level, you could do serious damage or kill this person. Yeah. And a lot of people would offload responsibility, resolving their cognitive dissonance, to the white lab coat person, who would encourage them, like, you need to continue if they showed any reservations about continuing to shock this person. Because on the other end of the microphone, this actor is going like, my heart hurts. This is really hurting me.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, should I continue? And a large percentage of the participants, went all the way to the end, and the actor on the other end stops making noise at like the third to last click. And so for all this person knows, they just killed somebody in a lab experiment. So yeah.
It's
we have this capacity.
It's given me, surprisingly and paradoxically, a lot of strength and kind of relaxed confidence to acknowledge that there is darkness inside of all of us. And just to acknowledge that so it can't blindside you, sneak up on you, acknowledge that we could all be any of it. We could be the homeless person, the addict, the the assassin.
The violent offender. Yeah.
Yeah. And, but we, having this acknowledgement of that, this loving container to hold all that, lets you act in a way that you choose to, right?
I think that's the secret, is that when you can embrace the shadow aspects,
it doesn't control your life.
No, yeah. It puts you in choice.
Yeah.
And to me, that's also the secret. People ask therapists often, like, how can you have compassion for people, A, that you don't have the exact shared experience with, and B, that do terrible things. And this is how. Like, this is how you have compassion. I can imagine what it's like to feel fear, even if I don't know what it's like to be on enemy lines, shooting people and getting shot at. But I can also imagine, because I accept the shadow aspects of myself, what it might have been like to fully let my rage take hold and harm somebody. I don't love to admit it. It causes me to feel uncomfortable, but there's some power in that because of what you said. Like, I get to be in choice. I get to calibrate my life to my values because I'm trying to embrace all of who I am. Freedom
is full awareness. It's not ignoring parts of society. It doesn't have aversion or attachment. Like in India, they'll meditate on death, like whether it's a dead animal or a dead human, like that they're setting free in the Ganges, they will look death in the eyes so they don't fear it and it doesn't control their life, as another example.
Yeah. I like to think of this process as like looking at the whole map. The Jung quote you just referred to, that unless we make the unconscious conscious, it'll dictate our life and we'll call it fate. So like a lot of times clients will come to me and say, I keep doing the same self-defeating things over and over again. I don't want to. Like, I don't know why I keep falling into these traps. There's lots of explanations for why that happens, but consistent with our conversation today, if we aren't willing to look at the whole map, then we're going to keep stepping in the potholes that are outside of our view. So we need to expand the view to see it all. So if I know I have a tendency to treat people poorly when I'm triggered in this certain way or in these certain relationships, and I am willing to look at it all and embrace this part of me, then, like we were talking about before, I now have the ability to choose better my path.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. Do you want to hear what Ram Dass has to say on the matter?
Oh, of course.
I feel like I've asked that before on here.
Maybe once or twice. I feel like he's maybe the third host of our podcast here.
Yep. Thank you, Ram Dass, Dick Albert. So he has this saying, the smile of unbearable compassion. Paradoxical, isn't it? Right? In fact, my brother, Jeremy, who we had on the podcast once upon a time, in his shirt company makes that on a shirt, the smile of unbearable compassion, that I quite like. So this is Ram Dass. He says, if you're going to be free, your freedom means that you do not avert your eyes from anything in yourself or anyone else. Freedom means to be a free awareness with what is. No aversion, no attachment. They say that for a saint, all the world are their children, and you feel the suffering of another person the same way you would as if it were your own child. It's almost unbearable. What makes it unbearable? There's a little statue of Buddha that has a little smile at the edge of its mouth. It's called the smile of unbearable compassion. Sounds like a paradox. The smile of unbearable compassion, it is the unbearable compassion. It is beyond bearing. If you were somebody, you couldn't bear it. But if you're the universe, and that is what you are all of that, and it is that balance inside yourself. The smile of unbearable compassion and that ability to embrace the suffering into yourself, to just keep taking it in and look towards it instead of away from it. And then take the way in which it reacts in you and keep doing that delicate balance number to balance that you still feel the humanity. And at the same moment, you don't sit around judging, like, what have you done to me? I'm a good guy. Why are you doing this to me? You don't apply your rational criteria to the universe because the way karma works is not understandable by your rational mind, since your rational mind is a product of karma, and a system cannot understand something that is meta to itself. This is getting trippy. It is a logical impossibility. You don't hear the full universe. Here's where the faith comes, and the faith is deepened through your own practices, through your own direct experiences. It's not belief that someone hands you. It is faith that comes from your own direct experiences, so you learn to keep your heart open in hell, finally.
Heart open in hell is another powerful phrase.
Yeah.
So I guess talk to me about the smile of unbearable compassion from your mind's eye. Like, what does it mean to you? How have you leveraged it for your mental wellness?
It's something that I've been working on since my first ever ayahuasca experience, is the ability to hold love and compassion given the suffering that exists out there, given the unfair, the unfair blows that are dealt to so many people and all the suffering and calamities, but also the ability to hold my own emotions in that state of compassion. Like, he says it ironically, like, it's almost unbearable, but it's bearable if you slip into the witness consciousness and are more of that universe with an infinite reserve of ability to hold something. So the ability to hold anger, like an emotion that might be protective and important, and love, like to the ability to move through life and do what you need to do, but never take the other person out of your heart.
Yeah, that sounds really hard. That sounds really hard to do.
I didn't say I can do it. I just said
you can put your foot behind your head. I can't.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if you could do this too. Yeah, I'm just thinking of, I've got a few clients right now that I'm trying to help learn to feel their emotions, that have locked their emotions away. And when powerful emotion comes, very understandable, I do this too in a lot of ways, they do whatever they can to make it go away. I went to see Dear Evan Hansen in Salt Lake with my family, with my wife and my two older kids. And I was fighting tears unsuccessfully the entire show. I mean, I've listened to music, but I've never actually watched the full play before. It's such an evocative play. And, it was triggering all kinds of things in me. And I had a choice. Like, I can just weep openly and loudly for the duration of this show, or I can just, I certainly let some tears fall. But it was difficult for me to hold that emotion in that context and to fully express it. So I have a lot of compassion for those of us, which is probably all of us, who would struggle to widen that aperture, as I called it, or as you said, like get back into witness consciousness and walk their path holding these emotions that feel paradoxical.
Yeah. And like we talked about once upon a time here, that I think you'll remember, even Ram Dass, with his enlightened words and the enlightened way he showed up to teach so many people, when he had a stroke, he became bitter and angry and turned away visitors for a time and slipped back into his egoic place of poor me for a while until he woke back up from that. And it's never an absolute, all one and not the other, right? That's one of the paradoxes, is it's this delicate dance between open and closed, between light and dark, between selfish and selfless and everything else.
Yeah, we're not static beings, are we? We're in flow, and between two extremes, perhaps the two horns of the dilemma. But yeah, we're in flow. So, I'm thinking now about ways that maybe are healthier to grapple, in addition to what we've already talked about, to grapple with paradox in our lives. I like the concepts of, radical honesty and compassion about the realities we've discussed so far, the realities of our shadow sides, the realities that what we are capable of, both good and evil, so to speak. That if you can open up and confront and accept all those parts, that it's a lot easier to move in the ways that you were just talking about through your world. And I think the concept of parts that we've talked, especially recently, a lot about, this concept that's recently been made popular by Dick Schwartz with internal family systems, really helps me personally grapple with paradox.
Yep.
I have a part of me that is self-conscious. I have a part of me that is greedy. I have a part of me that is really lusty, or a part of me that is power hungry, but it's not all of me. I also have parts of me that are just like overflowing with compassion, and that are pro-social, and that are loving, and that are kind, and that are, lazy. And
there's a higher self, a capital S self, that Dick Schwartz gives some great ways of identifying with his 8 C's, like when you're feeling calm and curious and compassionate and all those things connected, that is a signal that you may be in that capital S self, and that AKA witness consciousness, AKA the wider container where you could see that there are parts of you that are clinging, grasping, averting, avoiding, attaching, whatever it may be. And it's okay. And you can have that smile of unbearable compassion towards them and love them into the light and wholeness and act from your higher self.
Yeah. I wonder if that's one of the, just to sort of, out of obligation, bringing in a psychedelic reference. Like, I wonder if that's part of what psychedelic assisted therapy does. Like, part of the power of psychedelics puts us in that witness consciousness seat, shows us our parts, shows us the dualities, shows us that it's okay. Certainly on the menu for a psychedelic experience.
Yeah, and at the end of that Ram Dass reading, it was something about through your own direct experiences. And I believe that psychedelics can give you a direct experience. That's why we love a good transpersonal experience, or a way of connecting with something bigger than yourself or outside of your little S selves.
And that was my experience last night at Breathwork.
Yeah.
At least at the end, as I'm, lying there on the ground, unable to move, unable to talk, feeling like a diffuse cloud of energy. Quantum energy, wave and particle at the same time.
Dang.
I was making I still had an I there. I wasn't totally ego dissolved, but, making some promises to myself. I felt I was in this just totally anchored space where all was well, because all was acceptable, not because all was great, right? And it was so powerful to be in that space, knowing that it wouldn't last, knowing that, tomorrow I'm going to get annoyed or frustrated or tired, and I'm going to have doubt will creep back in.
And it's okay.
And it's okay.
Yeah, it's like when meditating, You don't try to empty the mind. The mind actually wanders. That's what it does. And it's okay. And that's what we're sitting with. It's not, that's one of the reasons people get so caught up and frustrated with it is that black or white idea. But you brought up the psychedelic therapy reference, and I feel like pointing towards DBT as well here, because I know I've been talking about the spiritual perspectives of this, like ancient Taoist views, or like Ram Dass's like Hindu informed kind of enlightened perspective of things with karma and all that. But if you look to good old fashioned westernized DBT, it brings in these ideas in a more accessible way, I think, like dialectical behavioral therapy, the dialectic meaning that both can be true. Like, I am doing the best I can and I have work to do, and it's okay.
Yeah. Great reference. Anything else before we wrap up today's episode?
I think I read this thing, revisited this talk from back in the 90s from a pastor about the paradoxes of our time, and I still think it's relevant. I don't know if it's useful, but I kind of want to read it because it's fun.
I'll allow it.
Okay. So this is by Dr. Bob Moorhead from Seattle's Overlake Christian Church, I think. We're living in a bit of a weird time, full of paradoxes. It's a time in history that we have taller buildings but shorter tempers, wider freeways but narrower viewpoints. We spend more but have less. We buy more but enjoy it less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences but less time. We have more degrees but less sense, more knowledge, less judgment, more experts but more problems, more medicine, less wellness. We drink too much, smoke too much, spend too recklessly, laugh too little, drive too fast, get too angry too quickly, read too seldom, watch too much TV. We have multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. We talk too much. We've learned to make a living but not a life. We've added years to life, not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We've conquered outer space but not inner space. We've done larger things but not better things. We've cleaned the air but polluted the soul. We've split the atom, but not our prejudice. We write more, learn less. We plan more, but accomplish less. We've learned to rush, but not to wait. We build more computers and to hold and produce more information than ever, but have less real talk. These are the times of fast foods and slow digestion, tall men and short characters, steep profits and shallow relationships. More leisure, less fun. More kinds of food, less nutrition. These are the days of quick trips, disposable diapers, throwaway morality, one-night stands, overweight bodies, pills that do everything from cheer to quiet to kill. It is a time when there is much in the show window and nothing in the stockroom, a time when technology can bring us closer or further apart. Yeah, we live in a world full of paradoxes, full of convenience and stress, full of suffering that doesn't have to be there.
Paints a bleak picture.
I think it still rings true. Yeah, perhaps even now more than ever. But I like it as a reminder, a wake-up call.
Yeah. Yeah, if nothing else, a reminder of why it might be useful to do some of the things we've talked about today with respect to those paradoxes. That in spite of all those things, there is also good. There is also like wonderful things happening to the human race, to the human soul, especially at the individual level. And that maybe in order to minimize the negative side of those paradoxes, we need to do what you were talking about. Like, we need to step back, the witness seat of consciousness, accept that they're all true, and then move toward value-based action.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thanks, Reid.
Thank you.
Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Numinous, a mental wellness company committed to tackling the global mental health crisis by delivering best-in-class psychedelic-assisted therapies, contributing to the body of primary and clinical psychedelic research, and fostering healing through community connection and social responsibility. You can learn more about Numinous at numinous.com. That's Numinus.com. If you enjoyed the show today and you want to support us, here's how you do it. Rate and review the show on platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Subscribe to the Numinous YouTube channel, like the videos, and share it. Share the show or clips of the show with someone that you think will enjoy it. The content of this podcast does not constitute medical advice or mental health treatment. Consult with a medical or mental health professional if you believe you are in need of mental health treatment.